Are you going to be static, or are you the previous one not gone yet?
This will be static. I am setting up the streaming.
Okay. We sit down here and watch each other quietly.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so static.
45 minutes of static. Actually, this is a short session.
Try.
35 minutes of static.
That's another static. Yeah.
All right. Live stream should be up and Hangouts link on the wiki.
Where are the others?
No.
I'm not in the stream. Good.
Don't mean any offense by this, but I might go sit. I might go sit in Jeremy's session. I might not sit, but
That's fine.
okay. It's not personal. I just didn't mean to send the wrong signal by any guys, but
That's
I have to
perfectly
restart the
fine.
stream.
No, it was just an idea to have one more session because
I think it's really good stuff. Because I ended up using all of the things that you talked about this morning at one point or another and didn't know they existed for a long time. And I was like, well, crap. This saves me writing a lot of painful code.
Drinks a lot in this room?
Oh, what's wrong with you? Seriously?
Enjoy.
If this makes horrible noise in advance, well, I'm not sorry.
Sure. I was asking because it looked like coffee beans or something.
Almond.
Because this looks like a coffee.
Yeah, it's almond in soy sauce.
What?
Sauces. Yeah.
Almond in soy sauce.
Well, that's bad.
No, it's something else.
No, sorry.
No, probably.
Something's fucky with my laptop. I'm just gonna reboot this now. It's the second fucky thing that happens today. Note to self, when you're using multiple usernames with the same user ID, put both of them in the sudoers file. I got tired of trying to symlink my work stuff to my local stuff, and I instead just created another user.
Now it's late in the afternoon after a lot of thinking and activity and you're tired. Egypt. Okay, so where did that save to?
one is this? I can't remember. I just know I wanted to.
Services for static sites.
Oh, that was it.
What the hell happened with this? It looks like my something went wrong with voltage on my laptop.
Oh, well, I want to work here. They give you free snacks. I can go to my workplace.
My workplace, they even charge for the coffee.
It's a one
Ridiculous.
And it's bad coffee.
Hey, I'll start to interrupt. Just a heads up. This is a shorter session, so we wrap at 5:30, and then we meet back in the main room at 5:35 for
Okay.
a
In that
recap
case-
and then intro to day 2.
In that case, let's start. I'll bring up an Etherpad. I'm guessing it will be slash static. Do you want me to present anything? You might do.
Maybe best if you sit up here then.
No, we can.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Just press the button, someone, please, to mirror the display. Yeah, it's okay. So, services for static sites.
Oh, it's still static.
Now, I am aware that most of, no, not this one. Most of them, well. So we did have a static already once, so long ago.
It's there.
IndieWeb Berlin, 2018 session.
Ah, I got both Berlin and Nuremberg on the same page.
Yeah, some others have been doing that. Just
Yeah.
Okay. So, what I wanted to talk about is that I don't know how well organized entries in the wiki are, which is mainly my concern, that the WordPress community is growing and it's nice, and we now have a getting started with WordPress and advanced WordPress and WordPress plugins and WordPress themes and WordPress and everything WordPress. On the other hand, there are also a lot of services out there which are ready to be used with basically anything. You may need to write a little bit of code or glue or a bash script to connect to them, but practically any website could be able to use them. And I think it would be nice to summarize them, and if we have any experience, then share the experience, that what are the pitfalls or other problems or benefits on the other side using these services. So from my experience, what I can talk about is that there are three or four topics. One topic could be the web mentions, as in receiving web mentions. Obviously, another is sending web mentions. And I will get back to the point why the two things are not necessarily connected. Micropub, microsub, and is there anything else? Maybe search. Because search with static websites is a pain. Services I'm aware of, and the wiki might actually have them. So I'm just going to link the wiki page if we have. So obviously webmention.io. Actually, those should be on the webmention page itself under the services. Where are you? Firefox, articles, resources, extensions. Yes, there are a few here. Services. So, oh, Bridgie is an exception. Let's put it here. That's a whole different story. So they are known, but they are not necessarily linked to the building blocks for static websites or other things. And if anyone else is aware of anything that's not listed here, then let's please talk about it. So there's Bridgie. Jack mentions was a service, so that's not there anymore. I've never heard about lazy mentions. Open source service, you can. Does it? Hello. Do you have sound?
Yes, I do, but I muted myself because I also have kids.
Okay. You hear us and we hear you, so it's perfect. Node.js server. Now, do we also want to include it in the session, as in how to actually use these services, or at least demo some examples?
We've only
Or
got half
that's
an hour, so that's probably
that's
something to cut.
probably a bit long, but I'm willing to help with anyone tomorrow.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. As a hacking session.
Yeah, please.
So let's address this in another way. Is anyone using any of those services that we've mentioned, talked about, present under the /web mention page?
Me, I just had an entire website built upon workflow of using WebMention and Bridgie.
Workflow?
Well, yeah, a workflow, for lack of a better word, yes.
What's workflow?
A workflow.
A workflow, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, the receiving web mentions was quite easy. You put the rel link at the top and point that to webmention.io. It handles it. When the static site is built, you query the webmention API, you pull in the entries, and you build them out as files onto your static site. That is fantastic, and you have to do some parsing to figure out response, all these normal kind of things. The area I found lacking was sending web mentions. I didn't investigate it too hard, I have to admit.
Is Telegraph on your list up there then? Telegraph is the way that you can.
Yes, I know about that, and we'll get there with the
Mhm.
sending web mentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't see the screen,
But
sorry.
same thing, yeah, that kind of thing was non-obvious. And one of the reasons why I shifted to a far simpler database CMS solution.
When you pull the contents from web mention, do you pull all of them, or do you put in a time limit?
I think I had to pull in all of them because there was nothing being stored.
Yes.
On the static site.
Oh, static site. So because, okay, so I do have a static site, but I do store the comments, and it's the whole thing is self-made. There's no framework around it, and I do store a YAML and content version of the comments themselves as well.
I was thinking something similar along those lines, right? The amount of markdown files or something.
And it works, and I haven't actually taken care of the privacy implications of that. So yes, it's stored on my laptop. Meh. What I display and how I display, only the URLs so far. It makes querying web mentions significantly lighter, which I think is good from the service side, given that it's a free to use service.
You don't want to pummel it.
And after a certain while, we'll be pulling megabytes and megabytes, and that's.
I found it, and oddly, I've got a relatively popular site. Kind of like Hacker Noon. A Hacker Noon news kind of like front page kind of thing. So I get like a lot of comments on there occasionally. And web mention was never a slowdown in the build process. But of course, obviously, it's not good to query them repeatedly.
Now, an alternative approach is that you do query the incoming web mention, but you parse the sites yourself, which could be one of those things. If you want to deal with 410's content deleted, you probably have to do this because, as far as I understand, web mention.io will not indicate that there was a deletion. I don't think anyone's doing that.
No.
It's an extension that could be built into static flows. That was really dealing with it. Any other service for receiving web mentions?
The other extension for that for me was Bridgie. Using Bridgie to get the stuff from the pub, from Twitter and Facebook.
But Bridgie is not.
Send that to web mention. I know technically, but I'm just talking about the flow that I had on that site.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So.
I think Bridgie also has a web mention receiver mode, but it's more intended, I think, for a few hosted blog platforms, and then it receives web mention and can post them as comments on your site. It's not intended to be used with general. I don't think it's intended to be used with general static websites, because as far as I know, it doesn't store any information. It just pushes them to a different API.
Yeah.
which is in this case the comment API. So
Yeah.
Bridgely can be used to receive web mentions, but not just that.
The other big, so for sending service from if you send web mention to somebody, this is how works. And yes, this will be a problem and solution for it. However, there are web mention sending services, and one of them is our Telegraph. That's a relatively new thing. It's on this on the left, and you could host it yourself. Oh, really? So Telegraph is just ending web mentions. It can also bring back. I understand. I'm not certain about that. Nearly as simple to set it up as web mention. Um, give me 1 second. And so it's basically like this. You tell them where you want to send it from, where you want it to send it to. You need a token which you get from Telegraph when you register, and practically that's it. What I wanted to avoid is to resend web mentions that there was nothing that changed on my side, for which I basically write a file. And if that file exists and it's older or the same timestamp as the content itself, then walk away.
You write a file where? Where to the
Well,
to
in the same tree as the data.
This is the stuff living on your laptop. You were
Yes.
saying? Okay.
So, oh, not this one. This one. You see a content folder, and the content folder is actually is what the actual source content of the file is, and there's a web mention directory where I create plain text files, which all contain the JSON response coming in from web mention from Telegraph, and that's it. The name is a slugified URL to slugified URL, so it doesn't get that fancy.
Yeah, I think that was one of the problems I found with it, was knowing what to send and resend. Because the mindset I was working in was with a GitHub repo, and yes, you could do some commits to the repo and say there's a file here, so don't send this one.
The funny
It
bit
just
of
felt very complicated for me.
the funny bit of sending is that you need to figure out where to send it. Otherwise, it's an extremely simple post request.
Yeah.
But to find it where to send it, that's something that could be useful. So even if Telegraph doesn't actually send the web mention to you, it could just return. That's actually something that we could bring up with Aaron. To just return the endpoint you need to post to.
Mm-hmm.
It does the whole detection of, is this a site that's supporting web mentions? If yes, then what's the endpoint, and so on and so on. But that should be a useful service as well. And then you take care of the post yourself. And then eventually we're going to end up with block lists that are blocking the residential IP addresses, and we're just reinventing email. Okay. Where did the things go? Oh,
Down.
bottom, down, okay. Micropub and microsub, two topics I have no idea about. So I'm actually open for a completely open discussion. Because I know what those things are. I actually wrote my micropub endpoint at one point in time and dropped it when I went static. Well, I went actually static.
You can the micro pub page should have a list of a bunch of tools that were
Servers, clients, libraries. Micropub servers. Micropub clients. So who's familiar with the terminology of micropub? Who's not? Okay. Micropub is essentially an idea that there should be a generic format of receiving a post and the generic format of sending a post. So you could use any client with any server and make it into a CMS on the fly. So if you write something in JavaScript or just plain old form, and you send it to a micropub endpoint with the proper headers and the proper authentication and authorization, it should become a post. Now there are client libraries and existing client solutions for this, and there are server solutions and server libraries existing for this. And this is what this page lists. And for server, I'm services silo.pub and on your responses. I think I've tried on your responses at a certain point in time.
okay, but neither is really for static site, which is interesting
No.
because there are, like I know that David Goldsmith has made NanoPub, but it's not a service. It's software to run on your server but it will integrate with the static site generator. So I think NanoPub is written in Go, and by default it creates the kind of file Hugo expects. And I know that some people have been working on adjusting it to use it with other generators. But I don't think anyone runs it as a service.
Okay.
Kind of feel like Voxpelli has something that. Could you click here on the link to Jekyll?
Yeah, that's
in
what
the
I was.
table?
Yep.
Because I think
That's web page micropub to GitHub.
yeah.
Self-hostable micropostage Jekyll. Yeah, that sounds like a solution.
Yeah.
And that's in.
No, I guess.
What's it written?
I guess not. It has a.
Yeah, it looks like Node.
Yeah, it has a yarn.log file.
Yeah.
Node. So you
Okay.
could run that probably for free on Glitch if you wanted.
So it very much looks like there's no existing service which is run by somebody for peanuts. But there are solutions you could self-host or host somewhere, or well, actually, what would be a useful solution is something that could run on a free tier Google or free tier Amazon or something like that.
Yeah. So since this is a node, there's glitch.com, which is kind of like a code. They're kind of intended for people also to learn code, but there you can host simple node apps for free, which you could probably use that way.
Yeah, glitch is sorry.
Yeah, it's JS very much required, and
it's
a bit odd, but it works from what I can tell.
It works because that's where IndieWebCamp is hosted.
Yes, and I host also a small tool there, and you can basically any node application you can just run. And for a micropub server, there are restrictions, which are I think like at maximum 4,000 requests an hour, and really a problem unless you're really crazy. Like I don't know whether you post every 10 seconds or so.
10 seconds? No, not even location. No. Okay. So then there are the micropub clients, but that's a whole different story, and it doesn't. There are existing things out there. There is Quill, not Quill.
Yeah,
Quill, which is by Aaron, and that works quite well.
What's interesting in this context is maybe own your services. And you write like 15, 16, 17, on your check-in, on your gram, on your swarm.
By the way, we're halfway through, so just...
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is one of the reasons why micropub is also interesting. On your gram is a service which, if you post something to Instagram, it automatically makes a micropub request to your site and posts the picture to your site as well. Because two reasons: A, you can't really automatically post to Instagram.
Yeah, there's no API.
They don't have an official API, and they don't. and they don't even have a nice way to do it on desktop. So it's kind
There
you,
are
you can hack it, but it's not
there are unofficial ways to do it. There is no supported official way to do it.
exactly that, and they have a relatively nice app to do it mobile, so it's a nice interface to post pictures on mobile, and it's basically the Bezos concept that you post there, and then it automatically gets pulled to your site. And with micropub as a standard, you can use that at any site,
So
which is the nice thing.
many
And
of
on
the
your Swarm does the same for the Swarm check-in app.
they're on this list.
Yeah.
Many of these things are basically these are front ends, and I'm unaware of any desktop solutions so far.
It might be
So
for
these are-
Mac OS in the form of a client for micro.blog, but I'm not sure. They're mostly, and
but-
it's command line ones, but
Well, that could be considered desktop.
Yeah. they're mostly web applications.
So they are mostly web applications, yes, except for the micropub XMPP pod, which actually sounds fun.
Oh, and OmniBear is a browser extension.
Hmm?
OmniBear.
And
It's a browser
OmniBear
extension.
is a browser extension, which is a very simple way to do this.
It's especially like nice for bookmarks and likes.
Microsub. So microsub is followings and following other people and essentially presenting a real-time stream for followers. My understanding is that the easiest way to buy into this is get a free Superfeeder account and use it as your feed hub.
Okay. You mind? Then that's WebSub. Microsub is the reader protocol. But WebSub is the important one here.
I
so-
keep mixing it up. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
No problem.
No, that's out of context. Microsub. Yes.
WebSub.
The used
Or
to be
PubSub
known
Hub.
as PubSub Hubbub. Yes.
I'm kind of sad that I changed the name. But
Yeah. So there are fire hoses where you can just send your feed, and they will turn it into a live stream. So, think about it as publish subscribe protocols in general terms. Publish subscribe protocols are three-legged things. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the term. Everyone's familiar with it? No. I'll throw that down. That's gonna be safe. So PubSub protocol is basically there is a service somewhere which is yes, which is the service itself. And then you have two types of clients, the publishers and the subscribers. That's why it's a PubSub. So the publisher, the subscriber dials in and tells the service that I would like to listen to things, a channel, a tag, content. It depends on the actual implementation of the publish subscribe. And there are obviously a lot of subscribers. And they want to get the content as fast as possible. So they keep getting, they are either constantly connected or some very fast polling mechanism. And then there are the publishers who sometimes push things into the subscription service. And it's like, hey, we got a new content. And they just publish a URL. So all of the subscribers in that topic will get a notification that there's something new coming in. This is practically, in a sense, what WebSub is about. And what you want to achieve from your point of view is to somehow notify that service that is the hub that you have new content. There are multiple ways doing this. Simplest way is get a Superfeeder account, which is free, and use it as your hub. And the way to use it as your hub is you just tell your RSS feed's address to Superfeeder. You probably also want to mark up your own feed so that it indicates what's your hub, and you have to put in a header in the where are you? In your website. And I'm sorry for slowing down. I think I'm getting a bit tired. Yes, there is a link rel hub in the header, which points to the Superfeeder account I have there. And if you go to the actual feed, it also has an indication of the hub somewhere. Or at least no, sorry, only the Atom feed has it. If I find it.
Line 11.
Yes. Rel hub. More or less the same header. Any other web sub services we are aware of?
I think Aaron runs one that you technically can use. I think Sivaisky runs one that you technically can use. But like
Mm.
the version, I think. Yeah.
No, we should never have invented capital letters. So this is the whole description. It's also one of the V3C recommendations and hubs. There's also a WordPress plugin, of course, which will act as a hub.
Yeah.
AppSpot, Superfeeder, and Hub, and Switchboard. Oh, Switchboard! I forgot about Switchboard. Yes, it's Aaron's service.
But it's basically you also can have multiple of those.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can have multiple. I didn't know that.
Partially to support migration, so you can have several announced while you're moving, I think.
Yeah.
I think you can have multiple. I think it's the consumer is supposed to use the first one, but I think you can have multiple. When in doubt, check the spec. Check the spec, or ask me to check the spec. But
Yeah, we didn't touch syndication. Search or syndication, because I think we're running out of time. Fast vote. Search or syndication?
Syndication.
Syndication. Okay. Static sites and syndication. I've played around with this, then that. It only has 2 steps. It's free. It doesn't work. It works when you set it up, and then you leave it alone, and then it breaks, and it never tells you that it broke.
Depends on the things you're using it with. I've used it successfully for a couple of years at a time.
Every single thing I did in the past few months broke.
Mm.
So I don't have high hopes.
Again, it depends on the app it's interfacing with. Some of them, like for example, when it integrates with Pinboard, for example, it's not an official way of doing it, and there was a huge amount of drama over their integration with Pinboard because they set out some criteria and were making demands upon people and such.
yeah.
But when it's friendly with if there's this and that, then it can work fine.
Yeah, I think Peter tried to use it by following his feeds, right?
Yes. So the idea was that I set up hooks that follow my my RSS feed, and then syndicate to different services, including Bridgie. So send a webhook to Bridgie, so I don't have to actually send the my own notification to Bridgie. I have no idea what happened. No logs, no error messages, no nothing. It just stopped picking up new things from my RSS feed.
Free service. Yeah.
Yep. I went over to another service called Zapier, which has an extremely slow interface. So far, my experience is quite nice with it, but they have a very steep pricing range. If you only use 5 hooks with an init step and an execute step, then it's free. Everything above that, you could do actually multiple steps. So just read my RSS feed, post here, post here, post here, post here, post here, which would be lovely. And I'm looking at paying $50 a month, which obviously I'm not going to do. Self-hosted solutions exist, including some called Moonin and Hujin. Thank you. The 2 crowds, yeah. Yes. I've played around with it. It requires you to do all your apps on the certain platforms So if you have the time and the patience and everything, then sure, go ahead. Otherwise, yeah, it requires a lot of setup.
Yeah, you can of course also, if you have web mention sending, you can use Bridgie Publish for the platforms that Bridgie Publish supports, like Twitter.
But
I
Bridgie
think
Publish
Flickr,
requires a poke.
but it's a web mention.
Yeah, so
If you have web mention sending, you can.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because
So if you already have a web mention sending service, you could include the Bridgie link
in the code
for the publish, so it just goes through Bridgie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you
fair.
can do that for Flickr, and I think it was Flickr, Twitter, and I'm not sure what's left because a bunch of services.
Facebook.
No.
Not anymore.
No.
Oh, can you not now?
No.
They
I've
did
never used it.
because they closed the APIs recently.
Oh,
Twitter still
okay.
works. Flickr obviously works because the Flickr API is carved in stone for the past 15 years.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. Actually, it's a good thing. And it works quite magically because now it picks up. So if you have a photo which links to another photo and the U photo links to a bigger picture, it actually picks up the bigger picture. So yeah, Bridgie does magic, a lot of magic. That's actually, I write that down.
Yeah. And I think what I've also seen is people integrate when they are building their own flows on the static sites, have integrate command line clients. Like I think in Düsseldorf this year there was someone who used a command line Mastodon client to automatically cross-post to Mastodon, which of course needed custom code integration, but and with maybe so
Okay.
So that was something that he did during the build step.
Right, we have 2 minutes to wrap up. I think most of the building blocks are out there that you could hook into static sites. Some of them require minor changes in the static generation engine, which would be very nice of some of the generators to support hooks at least, or something like that. I know modifications to Ugo is a pain, unless you're very good with Go, which is a very well-used engine out there. I have no idea how easy to integrate it with these services.
What does everyone else use, by the way?
I wrote my own.
I don't actually use a static site.
I don't anymore, but I used to use Metalsmith, and that was very easy.
I've got my own as well.
I actually use Jekyll.
Yeah, but Jekyll is quite flexible.
Yeah, I did like some
Yes. So
plug it back.
so another complexity is partially like if you want to, for instance, if you want to do the web mention sending yourself, part of the thing is of course you can't do it during the build process because the page has to be online before that.
Well,
so
that's why I are seeing the page first and then send the web mentions. Yes.
Exactly. So for instance, but it has been a problem for people who try to use like continuous integration services on GitHub like Travis. They all don't have a problem with take this GitHub repository, make a build process, push the thing. But many of those can't easily do, and then do something after you've completed that push. Again, they often can do like trigger a webhook, which you can then maybe send to Telegraph or something like that, and tell them, hey, you should reprocess my site. You can do that, but if you want to run something locally, you can't easily do that. But I think, but it's also evolving. Like GitHub recently introduced new features for their continuous integration stuff. They might now be able to do that, and so and of course if you run it locally on your laptop, you always can script it that it does it after the upload.
Okay. The only topic we didn't touch is search. Yeah.
I think the short answer is the most common thing is a custom search form from Google or DuckDuckGo.
That's the only thing I still have as active on my site, because that's a PHP backed with SQLite.
Yeah. Good. I think there are, because I think like interestingly there aren't really services that run domain-specific search engines that are affordable. Like there's Algolia, but their free tier is relatively limited, and it's then the same thing. It's more for the free account is for testing, not for small production use. So production use is really expensive.
I think it's fine.
I should say it's what, so it's half past.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for the quick session. Thank you everyone on the call. We're going to the wrap up in the other room.
Bye bye.
Hang this one up.
No idea.
No idea. Then I won't hang it up.
Everybody to the main room. Let's talk about what we learned today. But we need to talk about it. Think of this.
Also, what I'm hearing here, Marty, is that you're going to stand there and talk to us what we've done today.
If each of you wants to whisper in my ear what to say about a session, yes, I will say it for you.